Thank you for joining us. This is Health Your Own Way podcast, and I am your host, Mo Atkins. Welcome to another episode. Today we're going to be talking about depression, working with Lilith as the dark goddess and or archetype. So this is going to be an interesting conversation. My guest is Fiona. She's a Depression Muse. Yes, I said Depression Muse. And Fiona is going to explain to us what a Depression Muse is. So Fiona, educate us here.
Okay, so a Depression Muse is somebody who uses their depression as a muse, as something to, what I mean by a muse is something to create beauty, to create art, depression as something to stimulate ideas. Yeah, that's in a nutshell, really.
I like
And it's also, it's also a little twist on the fact that muse can also mean when you muse over something, you're also thinking over something. And that's, I'm a big advocate of, okay, let's get to the root of the depression. Let's find out as much as we possibly can about your specific type of depression. And let's change it. Let's use it as something to create something beautiful. So that's where the Depression Muse comes in.
I think I understand. So, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. My assumption is the fact that, people do experience depression, but taking that depression and finding a way to articulate what you're going through in some kind of art form so that you can then understand it more in a visual representation or whatever representation you want, so that you can discover the deep root issues you may have and then find a way to resolve those issues. Did I get that right?
Absolutely. Not so much resolve.
Okay.
Simply because one of the things that I believe, and I think I should probably explain exactly what I mean by depression, because often the word depression gets bandied about an awful lot. I'm talking about clinical depression. I'm talking about the actual illness that is depression. And one of the things that I have struggled with, I've had depression since childhood, and I am now 52, so I'm getting up there.
You look good for 52. What are you talking about?
Thank you. My ego needed that this morning. Thank you. So I've known my depression for quite some time. I know it very well. That's not to mean it doesn't sneak up on me, but yeah, we know, I know it quite well. But in New Zealand, and I'm assuming that this is the same model that's worked pretty much over the rest of the world, the whole thing, if you have clinical depression, is they want you to recover from it. They want you to get better, and they want the depression to go away. Well, we'd all like that. Nobody that has depression enjoys it, despite what you may think. Nobody wants to be depressed. But the thing is, if you have clinical depression, and you've had more than one bout, there's a pretty good chance it's going to follow you around for the rest of your life. So it seems to me that the whole idea of recovering from it, getting better and leaving it behind is just ridiculous. I don't see the point. And I think that's probably why the global suicide rate is so high, because we are not treating depression as it should be. To my mind, depression needs to be celebrated. Now, there's going to be people out of there screaming and yelling at me going, you're completely insane. How can you celebrate something as horrendous? It's not easy. I'm not going to lie to you. It's not easy. And a lot of it comes from experience. I'm now at the point where I see my depression as a gift. I don't know who I would be without my depression. And I believe that has given me some personality traits, some morals, some values that I don't know that I would have had if I didn't have depression. So in that way, I see it as a gift. Don't get me wrong. I would still rather not go through the depressive episodes, which are just devastating. But I believe that it's more realistic to try and use that depression. If you see it as a gift, then you can use it to make a difference in the world. to make a difference in the world, to make a difference to yourself and to your own life. Does that answer the question, or did I wander off on a tangent? I
No,
tend to
you're
do that.
fine. You're fine. You're fine. I can bring it back. So I think for a lot of people that either watching or listening, you're saying, okay, Fiona, you're talking nonsense. Okay. Because most
Mm,
people are just saying, depression, most people want to recover from depression. But I'm not here to judge anybody. We're not here to, it's just basically educating you in different aspects of different thought process. That's what we're doing here. For me, when
mhm,
you mention about, celebrating depression, I think, it's fair to say for some people that are clinical depressed for the rest of their life, this is something they live with. So
mm.
why not work, as you said, change your mindset and just embrace it and realize this is part of you, and find ways to use that depression in the sense to maybe help others, or just or express yourself in a different manner that does help others or yourself long term, so it doesn't get basically you don't feel shackled, if that's
Mm.
does that make sense?
That's exactly it. That
Okay.
makes it, that
Yeah,
explains it
listen.
very well.
I listen,
And
Fiona.
I think, I think the thing too is that with depression, it's almost like we have a responsibility to talk about our depression. I certainly believe that talking about depression is the way to reduce the suicide rate. I firmly believe that.
I agree
But
with you.
I almost feel like we have a responsibility to do it, because the people that have never experienced depression have got no idea what it's like. And it's a very, very difficult thing to explain. Like most experiences, you can't really know it until you're there and you're experiencing it yourself. But I believe that if more people understood the mechanics of depression, there would be more support out there. There would be more help for people, and there would be more of an understanding. I would like to see us get to the point where we treat depression the same way that we treat the flu. Oh, somebody's got the flu, let's bring them a casserole. I would like to see us treat, people with depression like that. And I do believe it's possible that we get to that place, but it is going to take work. And the way that we do that is we start by talking about it.
No, I don't. I agree with you what you're saying in respect to communication. What I find is that depression, in a sense, is linked to mental health, and we all know that mental health is the stigma in society. Like, and when you say, a lot of people don't talk about it because people don't want others to know that they're depressed, and sometimes people are like, "Oh, you're not depressed. Why? Like, you have all this stuff and stuff like that." So people don't want to be judged, and even then, if they are depressed, again, the judgment is like you might lose your work, your employees, like you can lose your lifestyle, like or you can push people away because some people don't want to have that conversation with you, or think you,
Mm,
or they may think little of you. So a lot of people do suffer in silence.
mm.
So
Absolutely. And a lot of the times that people don't want to talk about it too is that they're frightened of it. Anything to do with mental illness, with your brain is terrifying to people. And that's again why there needs to be more understanding around it. And the only way that's going to happen is if we keep talking. That
mhm.
is the only way it's going to happen. Um,
So then let's talk
but
about the
yeah,
Lilith and dark goddess. How do you use it for depression then?
Lilith is Lilith is. I work with Lilith in two ways. Okay, I work with Lilith in a spiritual way, because she is my matron goddess, and I work with her in that way. As an archetype, she's fascinating, and she's fascinating in that she's all about sovereignty. To give you just kind of a brief, very brief kind of description, Lilith has been spoken of as Adam's first wife. God created Adam and Lilith, and basically Adam wanted to be on top, and Lilith did not want to allow that. Lilith didn't want to be beneath anybody. Lilith wanted to be equal, and that, Adam wasn't having it. Adam wanted to be on top. So Lilith called the true name of God, and then left Eden And then, yeah, there's a whole long story I could go into, but this is not the time or the place for it. But basically, that's her initial origin story, and in a very brief nutshell. And she is all about sovereignty. She's all about taking your own power back, standing up for who you are, regardless of whatever comes flying at you, regardless of who comes flying at you. And she's about speaking her truth. She speaks. She's not quiet. Lilith is not quiet. So I use Lilith in two ways. I use her as I say, as a spiritual, as a goddess. But the archetype, and particularly when I'm talking about depression, one of the groups that I run is Lilith's Flame Circle. And in Lilith's Flame Circle, I'm creating a set of oracle cards by channeling Lilith. So every week we look at one of these oracle cards in relation to depression. So, for example, justice is one of the oracle cards. Okay. Now, with Lilith, a sense of justice was her whole being. That's, how her whole life came about, was because of she said, this is right and this is wrong, and I'm not having it. In terms of depression, one of the things that we struggle with when we have depression, particularly when we're in a bout of depression, is we don't feel that we have any power. We feel that life is unfair, that how we're being treated is unfair. And as you mentioned before, we know about the stigma and the discrimination. We're not treated fairly if we admit to having a mental illness. So working with the card of Lilith and working with Lilith helps us to get our power back, to be able to find that within ourselves, that sense of justice, and to be able to fight for it. A lot of the trouble that we have, we're in the middle of an episode of depression, is we cannot get out of our own head. We've got thoughts going on and crazy stuff going around, and we just cannot escape from it. If you can find one thing to focus on within that episode, and most of us have a problem with, obsessive thoughts when we're depressed. So if we can find one thing to focus on, for example, let's take justice. If we can focus on the unjustness of us having depression and going through this and not getting proper housing and not getting everything we need because we have a mental illness, if we can focus on that, that's going to give us some power. That's going to give us just a smidgen of power to be able to get up and fight another day. And that's huge. That's huge when you're in the middle of a bout. That's huge. So that's kind of where I work with Lilith.
Like that. I think for a lot of people, they're like, what are you talking about, Fiona? Because, Lilith, you did give us a background in respects to that. And you explained how, using her origin or what she represents at the same time with the readings, and just work on, understanding how she empowers others and how she empowers you, and find your way and just focus on that instead of focusing on just the depression and how it feels. Try to channel it somewhere else is what I understood from you. And, a lot of people are wondering, okay, how do I get started? Like, how would I move forward with this? And I know this is something you offer. How, if somebody was interested in learning more about what you're stating today, what's the best platform to reach you out on?
Okay. So we have, there's a few things I want to kind of grasp on there. First of all, okay, where you can find me. You can find me pretty much anywhere under the Depression Muse, Fiona Tate. Your best way is probably, I have a website, thedepressionmuse.com. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook as the Depression Muse. But really, send me an email. You can send me an email at drusilla@depressionmuse.com. So I'm pretty easy to find. Okay, so, and I've lost my train of thought now. What was the other thing that you mentioned about?
Stating that.
All right.
Yeah.
How to make a start and working with Lilith. Now, one of the things that I teach in my programs is that when you're in the middle of the bout of depression, you know, your only job when you're in the middle of the bout of depression is to look after yourself. That is your absolute only job. Okay. The time to set all these things in place that are going to help you cope with those and to be able to deal with those depressive episodes is if you make the most of the times when you're well.
Okay.
Now, no matter how bad your depression is, there are times when life's easier. And those are the times you have to grasp and you have to make the absolute most of them. Now, one of the things that I think you need to do is you need to have a set routine about how a normal day should look. Now, when I say a set routine, you know, your medical team and your doctors will say you must exercise, don't isolate, you must join groups, you must eat, I don't know, potatoes and vegetables, you must do this, that, and the other thing. Nonsense. You must find what works for you and you must go with that. So you make your own routine. And the routine is the thing you make as basic a routine as you possibly can. And that's what you're going to do when you're not well. Okay. So for example, that can be get up, have shower, brush teeth, sit on couch, get up, have lunch, go to bed. It could be as simple as that. But it's the act of having that routine so that you don't actually have to think about your day. And when you can create that, when you're in a place where your head will allow you to create that, then when you're in the bout of a depression, you don't have to think about it. You have to go, bang, I need to follow that and I will follow this. You can follow instructions. When you're depressed, you can follow instructions. You're usually pretty pliable. You'll do what you're told. So follow your instructions. So making the most of the good days is the first thing. And that's where you can start going into the things like shadow work. One of the things I do is I send my clients emails every morning with, I pull a tarot card for them and I send an email every morning with a journal prompt for shadow work. So we can spend time journaling. We can spend time meditating. If you can't do either of those things, you can just keep in mind during the day, oh yeah, today's card was, I don't know, Two of Swords. Yeah, so you can do those things. It's about finding the balance between getting to the root of it, because the thing is too, getting to the root of the depression is a very powerful thing to do. And things like journaling and shadow work prompts will help you to do that. But that's not the only symptoms of depression. There's other symptoms of depression that you have to worry about. And there's also the fact that sometimes there is no reason for an episode of depression. Sometimes your brain's just going to say, bang, you're depressed. So none of the shadow work in the world is going to help you for that particular episode, because for some reason, the chemicals in your brain are not working. And you're ill. Go rest. So getting to the root of the depression is important, but not always relevant. I guess that's what I'm going to say. To my mind,
sorry, Fiona, why is it not relevant to getting the root of the depression?
Because only sometimes, because sometimes there is no root. Sometimes, as I said, the chemicals just don't work, and you're just having a bout. I can illustrate it a little bit better with a personal story. I got to the point where, as I said, I had depression since childhood. And I got to the point where I was pretty clued up. I knew all my triggers. I knew all my signs. I knew exactly when I was likely to get depressed, and I knew exactly what to do to hold it off. And then I had one episode where things were going well for me. My life was going really well. I'd started a new business. I had no man trouble. Everything was going brilliantly. Bang, woke up one morning depressed. Couldn't get out of bed. Couldn't believe it. All my symptoms were back to front. Everything was different. And that's the nature of the beast of depression, really. You think you've got a cyst and it will come in and throw you, because that's what it does. So for those episodes, when there's no reason, there's no cause, there's no triggers, it's a chemical imbalance in your brains, adjust your medication if you need to, just rest, and it will pass. It will pass. Where was I? See, I wander off when I start talking about this.
You were fine. Like, I think for us, we got a lot of suggestions and insight on respects to how to cope. I think the biggest one for a lot of people, regardless, is basically having a routine. Like, a lot of us over the past few years, especially with the COVID-19 coming with the pandemic, depression has been the biggest thing for many people. And it's because some of us aren't able to connect with our loved ones or things like that. So, I say this, if anybody's struggling with depression and you're looking for some guidance, as you can tell, Fiona, she knows her stuff. She's giving you some insight, and she said reach out to her by, you can email or any contact. We'll have her details in the show notes. And then before I let you go, Fiona, I know you said a lot, but what's next for you? What are you doing out there that you want to share with us that we should be excited for?
Oh, I got tons of things going.
Okay, let's narrow it down, Fiona. Let's narrow it down.
Okay, let's narrow it down. All right, so we'll narrow it down to, I've already spoken about Lilith's Flame Circle.
Yes.
One of the things I'm about to launch in the next 2 weeks is a program about tarot cards.
Oh, nice.
I believe in using the tarot cards to help you cope with your depression. Tarot therapy is something that's being used a fair bit now, and we're going to see more and more of it.
Nice.
So the next programs that I have coming up is a weekly tarot session where we go into depth into each card. So we're going right through the major arcana, right through the minor arcana. It's a long program. You can buy it in two pieces because it's so long. Because there's a lot of imagery within tarot. And I mean, looking at a tarot card and seeing the first thing that hits your attention from there can tell you a lot about where your mental health is. It can tell you just how well you are, and just if you're going to be tipping over into unwell, and what you can do from it. You can get so much from that one card. So within that, I also provide meditations.
Nice.
I send audio meditations to help you move into the card, go traveling. Again, helps you with your shadow work. And it helps you with your everyday stuff. It also helps to stir your creativity.
Okay.
And that's where you can start with the muse. That's where you can start using your depression and turning it into a creative thing of beauty.
Oh, that's beautiful, Leon. I appreciate that. You know what? Again, we, somebody like you, it's a different viewpoint. And I think many people are struggling out there, and they've been told the constant, try to get over it. But sometimes, you may need a different path, like yourself, as you mentioned, and as you indicated, eat better. Like doctors would say, eat better, drink water, stuff like that. It may not work for you. Maybe finding what works for you, a combination of something, but find your own path. I appreciate this conversation that we've had, Fiona. I've been enlightened a lot. I've been enlightened. And you know what? Anybody, honestly, if you're suffering, seek out help if you can, or reach out to Fiona. And I want to say thank you for being part of this conversation, Fiona.
Oh, thank you for having me. I love what you're doing here with this podcast. I love it. Thank you.
We're glad to have you join us. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, share with anyone that needs to be empowered and inspired. And don't forget to join us next week for the next episode of Health Your Way podcast. Have a good day, you guys.